Good evening and welcome back. Tonight, we're exploring the story of Thoth, one of the most fascinating gods of ancient Egypt. Who was the god of wisdom, writing, and knowledge, and why did the Egyptians see him as the mind behind order itself? What did it mean to believe that words had power, that names could shape reality, and that keeping records was something sacred? As always, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it for you? Whether you're winding down, drifting towards sleep, or just looking for a calm story from the ancient world, thank you for being here. Now, let's begin. The first morning fought its way in. A hard, pale light pressed against the edge of the world as if it meant to pry it open, and the world resisted. There was water everywhere. A flood without memory. A dark surface that swallowed shape and sound and made a mockery of distance. The air had no scent worth naming. The sky had not chosen a color. Even the idea of a horizon felt like a rumor. And then something happened that was more decisive than thunder. A line appeared. Not a line you could touch, not a line you could eat, but a boundary, a thought made sharp. A thin figure stood where there had been only wind. He looked like a question with a beak. He did not arrive with drums or flame. That would have been vulgar. He stepped out of nothing as if nothing had always intended to produce him, as if chaos had cleared its throat and decided to speak properly. He was tall, lean, and precise. An ibis-headed god, the curved beak like a crescent of bone, the eyes set with an intelligence that did not blink for anyone. He carried no weapon, because he did not need one. His hands were empty, and yet the empty hands felt busy, like the hands of a scribe before the ink touches the page. He watched the water, and the water watched him back, and the water, for all its appetite, did not rush to swallow him. It hesitated. Even the formless can recognize authority when it meets it. He spoke a number. Not a prayer, not a name, not a command, a number. It sounded simple enough, the kind of sound you might make if you wanted to begin counting stones on a riverbank. But there were no stones yet worth counting, and that was the point. The number landed on the world like a weight, and the world took it seriously. The water shifted, the air tightened. A little order crept in, cautious as a cat. He spoke another number, then another. The sequence was not a song, but it had rhythm, and the rhythm mattered. Every count implied a space between things, a difference, a boundary. 1 meant there could be not one. 2 meant there could be more than one. 3 meant the universe could begin to keep track of itself. And from that moment on, it never stopped. The others arrived after that, because once you introduce counting, you introduce comparison. And once you introduce comparison, you invite pride. A voice like distant metal spoke from the deep. A sun that had not yet risen in full cleared its throat and considered the idea of being worshipped. Somewhere in the dark, a breath moved that was so old it felt like the origin of breathing itself. The world, once it had tasted structure, began producing personalities the way a fever produces dreams. They were immense, these first gods, too big to fit in any story comfortably, full of hunger and impatience. They argued without language and wrestled without bodies. They swelled and crashed against one another in the unseen places, and through it all, the ibis-headed god stayed slim and steady, the kind of presence that makes chaos feel embarrassed. Someone asked him who he was, with the suspicion of a strong creature noticing a clever one. He answered with a name, Thoth, The name gave the world another kind of order, because names are not decoration. Once you have a name, you can be summoned, praised, cursed, blamed. Without names, the gods were only forces. With names, they became accountable. Thoth understood that better than any of them, and that is why some of them loved him, and some of them kept a wary distance, as if he carried a hidden knife. The knife was not hidden. It was language. He walked along the edge of the waters, and where his feet should have sunk, they found firmness. Land was not born with ceremony. It rose because someone finally insisted it would. Thoth watched the first mud settle, the first patches of ground harden, and his eyes narrowed with interest. This would be useful. A surface that could hold a mark. A place where a line could remain a line instead of melting back into dark. He crouched, and the gesture felt intimate, almost indecent, because gods do not usually stoop. He pressed his fingers into the damp earth. He lifted them. The impression remained. He smiled, and the smile was small and sharp. As the days gathered, the world started to develop habits. The sun rose, the sun fell. The moon changed its face as if it could not decide what sort of god it wanted to be. The water rose and withdrew. The land cracked and softened. Plants learned to reach. Animals learned to bite. Each small repetition made the cosmos less like an accident and more like a system. Thoth took pleasure in that, not the warm pleasure of a father watching a child walk, but the colder pleasure of a mathematician watching an equation finally balance. He measured the movements. He set down sequences. He began to craft a calendar out of the sky's behavior. Calendars are cages. Beautiful ones, yes, but cages all the same. You trap time in a pattern. You tell it when it must return. You make it predictable. And the predictable can be controlled. Thoth understood the temptation, and he understood the danger. Control is never neutral. Whoever owns the calendar owns the rhythm of the world. Whoever owns the rhythm of the world can starve people, bless people, or call it fate when it suits them. The other gods began to crowd around the idea of order like drunk nobles, around a new law they hope will benefit them. They made demands. They wanted days dedicated to them. They wanted feasts, offerings, moments when their names would be spoken more often than anyone else's. They wanted their births and victories pinned to the sky so that time itself would have to remember them. Thoth listened. Thoth smiled. Thoth wrote. And when you write down a god's desire, you expose it. Not all gods enjoy being exposed. There were gods who were raw force, who did not care for writing, who preferred blood and smoke and the simple honesty of fear. They called Thoth weak because they could not imagine a kind of strength that did not leave bruises. Thoth did not argue. He let them shout into the air until their voices grew hoarse. He watched them forget which threat they had made and to whom. He watched them contradict themselves. He made quiet notes. The notes would matter later. Because the world that begins with numbers does not stay innocent for long. On one of those early days, when the dawn came in thin and cruel, and the land still steamed from the night's damp, Thoth stood at the edge of a new river. It wound through the mud like a silver thought. It was not the Nile yet, not properly, but it carried the promise of a Nile, that slow, patient power that would someday make Egypt possible. Thoth watched the river move. He watched how it pulled at the banks, how it carved a path without malice, how it simply obeyed gravity and its own persistence. He respected that sort of behavior. Rivers, unlike gods, do not pretend. He dipped a reed into dark silt and drew on a flat stone. The mark was simple, a symbol for water, a curve that could also be a smile if you were in a generous mood. He drew another mark beside it, a symbol for land. He drew a third, a sign that meant boundary, because boundaries mattered. Then he looked up and saw something watching him from the reeds. It was not a god. Not quite. It was the idea of a creature, a shadow of a future animal, curious and cautious. A small mind peering at a large one. Thoth held still. He did not want to frighten it away. He liked being observed, in the same way a writer likes being read, though he would never admit it aloud. The creature came closer. It sniffed. It tilted its head as if trying to understand why the stone now carried meaning. Thoth placed the reed down and tapped the mark with one finger. The creature blinked. It did not understand, but it remembered. That is how the world learns, first by confusion, then by repetition, then by habit. Thoth watched it go, and he felt something like satisfaction, dark and quiet. If even animals could be changed by marks, then marks could change everything. A voice spoke behind him, smooth and dangerous. A god had come close without making the sky tremble, which meant the god knew how to be subtle, and subtle gods are always more trouble than loud ones. Thoth turned. The god wore beauty like armor. The god's eyes held humor that did not promise mercy. The god asked Thoth what he was doing. Thoth answered plainly. He said he was keeping track. He said he was making things that could be remembered. The god laughed and said memory belonged to the gods, that mortals would be crushed under the weight of it, that even gods could drown in what they refused to forget. Thoth listened and then said, very softly, that forgetting is not the same as forgiveness. The god's laughter stopped. Thoth did not win many arguments with force. He won them with the kind of sentence that sits in the mind like a splinter. The god left, irritated, and the air felt lighter when it was gone. Thoth returned to his marks. He added a fourth sign, one that meant silence, a space left deliberately empty. He honored his bargain. He also liked the look of it. A blank can be more threatening than a word, because a blank invites imagination, and imagination is always ready to bite. As the world thickened with life, Thoth's role became clearer. Other gods would rule by appetite. Some would rule by fear. Thoth ruled by definition. He became the one called upon when disputes threatened to tear creation into pieces. He became the one who could say, with that calm voice, what had been agreed and what had not. He became the one who could bind a thing to a name and make it behave as if it had always been meant to behave that way. That is what wisdom looks like in its earliest form. Not a kindly old man with a gentle smile, not a comforting voice promising that everything will be fine. Wisdom is often an ibis-headed god standing in the mud, counting the dawn, turning chaos into a ledger, and making the gods uneasy by reminding them that even immortals can be held to account. Thoth looked out over the water one last time as the sun climbed higher, more confident now, more arrogant. The day warmed. The world stirred. Somewhere, far off, other gods were already scheming, already fighting, already dreaming up problems that would require someone to write down the consequences. Thoth picked up his reed and tucked it away as if it were a dagger. He did not need to hurry. The universe would keep producing messes. He would keep producing marks. Every answer creates a new hunger. He knew that. He liked that. The calendar snapped shut with a clean sound. 360 days. Neat, countable, easy to command. Ra approved of anything that arrived in a straight line, and the sun god had grown tired of surprises. He had a sky to run and a court to endure, and enemies who never slept. So he spoke a law into existence, and the law settled over the world with the weight of a verdict. Nut, the sky, could not give birth on any day of the year, not on the first, not on the last, not on any of them. 360 locked doors. She could stand above the earth in her arching body and swallow the stars, but she could not open even one small door for her children. Ra said it with authority, and the other gods nodded, some because they agreed, some because they feared him, and some because they enjoyed watching someone else get punished. The world held its breath and waited for Nut to obey. Nut did not obey. She tried. She tried the way a trapped creature tries, pacing the same space, looking for weakness, pressing at every edge. She carried life inside her, and life insists. It pushes. It makes promises in the blood that no law can silence. She bent over the earth and hid her face in the dark hours, and she searched for someone who could break a rule without pretending it was kindness. She found Thoth, because everyone found Thoth when they ran out of honest options. He listened to her request with a still expression and eyes that missed nothing. He did not gasp. He did not lecture. He did not offer comfort. Comfort would have been a cheap way to avoid the work. He asked one question, short and practical. What exactly did Ra forbid? Nut told him. Any day of the year. Thoth nodded, as if Nut had just handed him a list of ingredients. He then asked another question. Who owns the year? Nut stared at him, because the answer was obvious, and the problem was that the obvious answer did not help. Ra owned it. The sun owned it. Time ran on his schedule. Thoth made a small sound of acknowledgement and looked up at the night, where the moon moved with its own pace and its own habit of ignoring the sun's pride. Thoth did not say that he had a plan. He rarely announced plans. Announcing plans invites interference, and gods interfere the way humans gossip. He only said, quietly, that a rule can be obeyed and still be defeated. Thoth went to the moon. He did not go with an army. He did not go with prayers. He went with mathematics and patience, and those are more dangerous than spears when the target believes it cannot lose. The moon had its own god, Khonsu, who traveled across the sky on schedule and still managed to act offended whenever anyone noticed. Khonsu liked being praised. He liked being seen. He enjoyed the pale attention he drew from the sleeping world. He also enjoyed gambling, because gambling creates the feeling of control while removing it. Thoth found him at the edge of the night, where the moon's light reached and where it did not, where shadows stayed sharp. Khonsu sat in a calm pose, satisfied with himself, and he greeted Thoth with the kind of welcome given to a guest who might be useful. The moon god asked what the scribe wanted. Thoth answered with the truth, because lies are a waste when the other party already expects them. He wanted light. Not all of it. A fraction. A small portion taken from Khonsu's store. Khonsu laughed, because the request sounded ridiculous. The moon god had more light than anyone could count. Thoth watched him laugh and did not change expression. That calmness irritated Khonsu. It always irritates the loud when the quiet does not flinch. Khonsu asked why he should part with anything. Thoth said he would not ask for a gift. He would win it. Khonsu liked the word win. Thoth produced a board, not a grand thing with jewels, because Thoth had no interest in spectacle. A flat surface, marked squares, pieces simple enough to hold and move. The rules were known among gods who enjoyed games with consequences. You could call it Senet, or you could call it something older that later humans would try to copy while pretending it was harmless. The game required strategy. It required reading your opponent. It rewarded patience and punished greed. Khonsu believed he excelled at it. He had played against wandering spirits and bored gods, and had taken their offerings without leaving his seat. He agreed to play Thoth because he assumed Thoth would be easy prey, a scribe, a record keeper, a god who did not roar or throw lightning. Khonsu thought he would enjoy the humiliation. Thoth sat opposite him and placed the pieces with hands that did not tremble. He offered the stakes again, a small portion of moonlight each time. Khonsu, pleased by the idea of winning repeatedly, insisted on the stake being set as a fraction of his light. He chose 1/72nd. It sounded small enough to be safe. Thoth accepted at once. The first game began. Khonsu made the first move because he wanted the advantage, and he liked starting. He pushed a piece forward with confidence. Thoth watched. He did not react. He made his own move, careful, controlled. Khonsu tried a quick strategy that had beaten impatient opponents before. Thoth answered it without haste. The game narrowed. A piece got trapped. Another got freed. Khonsu smiled when he thought he saw an opening. Thoth closed it. Khonsu grew annoyed. Annoyance is useful. It makes the opponent predictable. Thoth did not need to cheat. He needed only to let Khonsu be himself. They played in silence for stretches, broken only by Khonsu's comments meant to distract, and Thoth's brief replies that gave nothing away. When the first game ended, Thoth had won. Khonsu stared at the board, then at Thoth, then at the sky as if the sky had betrayed him. Thoth held out his hand, and Khonsu, still laughing as if laughter could reverse a loss, gave up the agreed fraction. 1/72nd of the moon's light slipped away from the full store and went into Thoth's keeping. Nothing dramatic happened. The moon did not crack. The night did not go blind. The difference was small. That was the point. Small thefts do not trigger alarms. Khonsu demanded a second game at once. Thoth agreed. He did not gloat. Gloating makes the other party reconsider. Thoth wanted Khonsu eager and careless. The second game ended with Thoth winning again, not by luck, not by sudden miracles, but by steady pressure and better judgment. Another fraction of light changed hands. Khonsu's confidence began to curdle into stubbornness, which is a reliable way to lose repeatedly. He insisted on a third game, then a fourth. The nights passed. The games continued. Sometimes Khonsu won a round and reclaimed a fraction, and he would crow about it, voice loud enough to wake sleeping stones. Thoth would nod, accept the loss, and adjust. He allowed Khonsu to feel clever, because a satisfied opponent takes bigger risks. When Thoth won again, he collected his fraction without comment. Over time, the collection grew. Thoth did not hoard light out of vanity. He measured it. He recorded each fraction. He counted until the numbers formed a result he could use. He knew what he needed, not an ocean of stolen glow, only enough to make time slip. Khonsu finally noticed that something had changed. The moon did not shine with quite the same certainty. The night still had light, but the light felt reduced. Khonsu grew defensive and angry, and he began to accuse Thoth of trickery. Thoth listened to the accusation and then asked Khonsu to name the rule Thoth had broken. Khonsu could not. The game had been agreed upon. The stake had been set by Khonsu himself. The losses had occurred openly. Thoth had simply kept count, and count is difficult to argue with. Khonsu raged anyway. Gods rage when they cannot win with facts. Thoth waited out the rage, because rage burns energy and time, and Thoth had both on his side. When Thoth had gathered what he needed, he stood and ended the games with a calm finality. Khonsu demanded another match, desperate to recover what he had lost. Thoth declined. Khonsu tried to threaten him. Thoth looked at him with mild interest, the way a person looks at a broken tool, and Khonsu stopped. Thoth then did the clever part, the part that would insult Ra without giving Ra a clear target to strike. Thoth took the gathered light and turned it into days. Not days that belong to the calendar. Not days that belong to Ra. Days that existed beside the year, outside it, and therefore outside the curse. 5 of them. He did not announce this to Ra. He did not request permission. He did not ask the other gods to applaud his ingenuity. He simply made the 5 days exist, and existence has a stubborn quality. Once a thing exists, you can complain about it, but you cannot easily deny it. The 5 extra days settled into the flow of time and created a gap where there had been none. A secret corridor through the wall of the calendar. Thoth handed those days to Nut without ceremony. He told her what they were. He told her what they were not. They were not part of the year. Ra had forbidden her to give birth on the days of the year. These days did not belong to the year. That was all. Thoth never pretended this was mercy. He made it sound procedural, because procedure is how gods slip knives into one another without calling it violence. Nut did not waste a moment. The first of the 5 days arrived, and she gave birth to Osiris. The child came into the world with a quiet gravity that made even loud gods fall silent. Osiris carried the look of someone who would one day rule, not with fire, not with fear, but with the confidence of a judge who believes law can hold. That confidence would cost him later. Nothing in Egypt comes free for long. The gods marked his arrival and began to make plans around him, because plans gather around power, the way flies gather around a wound. The second day arrived. Nut gave birth to Horus the Elder, bright-eyed and sharp. Not the Horus who would later fight, set over a throne, not the grieving son who would carry anger in his bones, but an older presence, a god already shaped for the sky, already linked to kingship and watchfulness. His birth tasted of ambition. The other gods looked at him and began calculating what his existence would mean. Thoth watched, and his face did not change. He recorded it. A god born is a problem born, because the universe does not add power without creating conflict to match it. The third day arrived. Nut gave birth to Set. Set did not enter gently. He arrived with force and appetite, a god who would not be contained by polite borders. His existence challenged the idea that order could win forever. Some gods welcomed him because they liked what he promised. Some flinched because they recognized what he would do. Thoth did not flinch. Thoth does not fear disruption. He catalogues it. He learns its habits. He prepares counters. Still, even Thoth noted that Set's arrival increased the risk of everything that followed. A world with Osiris and Set in it does not stay calm. The fourth day arrived. Nut gave birth to Isis. Isis came with a clarity that made even other gods feel slightly exposed. She carried skill, not brute strength, not loud authority, but capability. She would learn names. She would learn hidden rules. She would use them. The other gods saw her and felt the same unease they often felt around Thoth. A clever mind changes the balance of power more reliably than a spear. Thoth's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than they had on the others. Not admiration, recognition. Isis would not be easily fooled, and Thoth respected anyone who made deception expensive. The fifth and final day arrived. Nut gave birth to Nephthys. Quiet, often overlooked, and therefore dangerous in a different way. The gods do not always pay attention to what they consider secondary. They should. Nephthys carried the kind of presence that survives in shadows and learns what others drop. She would later stand at beds of death and keep watch. She would mourn and protect and endure. The gods greeted her with less noise. Thoth wrote her name as carefully as he wrote the others. He did not rank births by applause. That is a mortal habit and a foolish one. 5 births in 5 stolen days. Ra's curse lay on the calendar and found nothing to strike. The sun god could rage, and he would, but rage does not change definitions. He had spoken a law about the days of the year. Thoth had made days outside the year. The sun could burn the land. It could blind a river. It could scorch a priest. It could not erase a loophole that was already functioning. Ra noticed the new children at once. He felt the shift in the balance of power, because even the strongest gods feel competition the way a person feels a knife at their back. Ra demanded to know how this happened. The others looked away. None wanted to be caught endorsing the trick. Some wanted to claim credit, which is even worse. Thoth stepped forward, calm, and gave Ra the facts without apology. He said the children were born on days that did not belong to the year. He said no rule had been broken. He said he had used moonlight as currency and won it by fair play. Ra did not like any of this. But Ra also knew something that irritated him even more. Thoth had made the calendar stronger by making it more complex. The calendar could now hold the truth of what happened. It could now mark these births. It could now keep records that would last. Ra benefited from that, even when his pride protested. The consequences showed themselves in the sky. The moon shone with less power, not enough to end nights, not enough to ruin crops, but enough to remind everyone that Khonsu had paid and would keep paying. The moon god wore his loss poorly. He tried to explain it away. He blamed shadows. He blamed distance. He blamed anyone who would listen. The night did not care about his excuses. The night accepted the new amount of light and moved on. Thoth noted the change and stored the numbers. He had no interest in humiliating Khonsu further. He had already taken what he needed. Besides, Thoth knew that wounded pride creates future problems, and future problems are easiest to handle when you anticipate them. With 5 extra days, time gained a new shape. Priests would later argue about how to count them, where to place them, how to honor them. They would develop festivals, they would place offerings, they would tell stories. Some would flatter Ra by pretending he allowed it. Some would flatter Thoth by admitting he outsmarted the sun. The truth stayed fixed. Thoth had adjusted the structure of time with a wager and a steady hand. He had taken a private game and turned it into public reality. He had changed the future by shifting a number. He also set a pattern that would haunt gods and mortals alike. A clever rule can be beaten by an even cleverer interpretation. Laws do not end conflict. They shape it. You cannot stop ambition by writing it down. You only give ambition a new language. Thoth understood that better than anyone, and he did not pretend otherwise. He watched the 5 children grow into their natures, watched alliances form and fracture around them, watched Set's appetite scrape against Osiris's order, watched Isis begin to collect knowledge with a focus that would one day frighten even Ra. Thoth remained where he always remained, near the edge of power, close enough to influence outcomes, distant enough to survive when those outcomes turned bloody. He returned to his records after the births and wrote what happened in clean strokes. He recorded the wager, the fractions, the total light collected, the creation of 5 days that did not belong to the year, and the births that followed in order. He wrote the names carefully. Osiris, Horus the Elder, Set, Isis, Nephthys. Names are obligations. He made them permanent. Then he left space beside the words, blank space that belonged to silence, because every story ends somewhere, and every clever act leaves a residue that the future will scrape at with dirty hands. The hall where the gods argued did not need walls to keep sound inside. Sound stayed because pride kept it there. The floor held smooth stone and polished mud in alternating bands because even divine places needed grip, and too many feet had slid in anger. The air smelled of resin, smoke, and warm animal fat from lamps that never fully died. Offerings sat in rows near the entrances. Baskets of bread, bowls of beer, cuts of meat, fruit that bruised and darkened before anyone touched it, and jars sealed with wax, stamped by hands that wanted the stamp to matter. Voices rose. Some were thunder, and some were whispers sharpened into weapons. The gods argued over boundaries, over what belonged to whom, over which river bend counted as a gift and which counted as theft, over whether a promise spoken in anger still bound the speaker once the anger cooled. They argued over who deserved the first hymn at dawn and who deserved the last hymn at dusk. They argued over humans most of all, those small creatures who multiplied and prayed and kept getting in the way. They demanded tribute, they demanded obedience, they demanded that the world make sense and also flatter them for making it. Thoth sat near the center on a low seat that did not elevate him, because he did not need height to be noticed. He held a smooth pallet on his knees and a reed in his hand. His gaze moved constantly, taking in every face and every twitch at the corner of a mouth. He did not threaten anyone. He did not plead. He did not shout to be heard. He wrote. The sound of the reed against a prepared surface stayed soft, but it continued without interruption, and that persistence did something to the room. It reminded the loud that someone remembered. It reminded the clever that someone kept receipts. A god could roar and call it justice, but Thoth could write down the exact words, the exact claim, the exact denial, and he could place one line beside another and make contradiction visible. He did not correct anyone in the moment. He did not offer the comfort of immediate judgment. He collected statements in the order they were spoken. He recorded who swore and who hesitated. He recorded who pointed a finger first, because the first finger often belonged to the guilty. When a god tried to speak over another, Thoth noted the interruption too. That detail mattered later, when the interrupted one insisted they had been silenced, and the interrupter insisted they had simply moved the discussion forward. The court had rules, even when the gods pretended it did not. Someone had to announce the disputes. Someone had to decide who spoke first. Someone had to mark the end of an argument so the room could breathe again. Ra still sat above much of it, bright and heavy with authority, but even Ra did not want to handle every petty complaint that drifted upward. Power finds ways to avoid work, and delegation is one of them. Thoth made delegation possible. He provided structure that the other gods could lean on without admitting dependence. When two deities fought over a town's festival, Thoth asked for their claims in clear phrases and then asked whether any oath had been given. He did not ask this with warmth. He asked it with routine. Routine makes the wild seem manageable. One god would mention a promise made long ago. Another would deny it. Thoth would reach for an earlier record and read back the line, and the room would grow quieter because there it was, not a memory, not a story, but a mark that did not bend to pride. A promise written down had weight. The offender might still refuse to honor it, but refusal then carried a cost. The other gods could see the refusal. Humans could see it later. The universe, which noticed patterns even when gods pretended otherwise, could fold that refusal into the shape of future consequences. Writing became more than a tool for accounting. Thoth developed it into a system that could carry many kinds of meaning without collapsing. He built signs for sound and signs for objects and signs for ideas, and he built rules for combining them so that one line did not swallow another. He learned how to make a mark that meant water and also a mark that meant the sound that opened the word for water. And he learned when each mattered. He arranged the signs in ways that pleased the eye and still served the mind, because people obey what looks deliberate. He taught the hand to keep steady pressure so a line stayed consistent, and he taught the mind to keep steady focus so a sentence stayed accurate. He experimented with surfaces. Clay took a mark easily, but cracked in heat. Stone lasted but demanded effort, and effort made people choose their words with care. Wood carried symbols but warped and split. Papyrus, once it existed in usable form, welcomed ink and offered speed, which created new dangers. Speed allows lies to spread. Thoth did not fear that. He planned for it. He created methods for sealing a text, for stamping it, for setting witnesses beside it, for making forgery difficult and discovery likely. He created ink that clung, made from soot and gum and water, and he made red pigment too for warnings, headings, and names that needed special treatment. He made scribes learn to mix it properly so it did not smear, and he punished sloppy work with extra practice, not because he cared about aesthetics, but because a smudge could turn an oath into a loophole. Some gods complained that writing made speech less holy. Thoth listened and asked whether they meant holy or convenient. The complaint usually ended there. Speech vanished into air. Writing stayed. That difference made some of the gods angry because it reduced their ability to revise the past. They had enjoyed a world where a lie could be replaced by a louder lie. Thoth reduced that freedom without lifting a finger in violence. He simply made a record. He also understood how records could be used as weapons, and he did not pretend he was neutral. He chose what to preserve in full detail and what to summarize, and that choice was power. He could describe a god's generosity with a list of quantities and dates. He could describe a god's cruelty with exact quotes. He could let the facts speak, and facts speak sharply when placed in the right order. Some gods tried to flatter him. Some tried to intimidate him. Thoth accepted neither approach. Flattery asked him to become careless. Intimidation asked him to become afraid. He valued care more than praise, and fear more than threats. Because fear kept a mind alert. He stayed alert. The first human scribes arrived in the wake of these divine habits, because humans always copy what the gods do and then pretend it was their own invention. They watched priests move through temples, carrying pallets and rolls, marking inventories of grain, counting livestock, listing offerings, writing names of the dead so those names would continue to receive attention. Humans learned quickly that the written mark could move goods and control labor and decide who ate in a bad season. They also learned that the written mark could accuse. A priest could point to a line and call it law. A tax collector could point to a list and call it debt. A judge could point to a confession and call it guilt. Thoth watched humans take his gift and use it as expected. He did not scold them for it. Scolding does not change behavior. Structure changes behavior. So he placed certain teachings in the temples and kept other teachings restricted. He made some texts public, and he made other texts dangerous by design, requiring training, purification, and strict rules for handling. He built rituals around writing because ritual increases friction. Friction prevents the careless from reaching sharp tools. Thoth also allowed writing to carry power beyond record-keeping. Words could hold spells. That did not surprise him. A spoken name already carried force in the mouths of gods. A written name could carry force across time. He experimented with this, methodical, curious. He wrote protective phrases and watched their effect on snakes that tried to enter a sanctuary. He wrote curses and watched thieves wake with pain in the joints and fear in the throat. He wrote blessings and watched a child's fever break. He did not assign moral purity to any of it. A tool remains a tool. What mattered was precision. A sloppy spell failed. A vague curse bounced back. A well-formed phrase produced a result that could be repeated, and repetition was the beginning of control. Priests began to seek him in prayer, not in the broad pleas offered to the sun or the river, but in the focused way of people who needed their hands to work correctly. They prayed for steady fingers. They prayed for clear eyes. They prayed that the signs would come out right and that the ink would not blot. They prayed for memory and for attention. They prayed that their own lies would remain hidden, though they rarely admitted it even to themselves. Thoth listened to all of it. He gave skill to the diligent. He gave mistakes to the arrogant. He did not need to punish much. Writing punished on its own by preserving errors. One day, a god approached him in the hall after a long dispute. The argument had involved a pledge, a boast made too loudly, and an outcome that had embarrassed the speaker. The god carried anger that had cooled into calculation. He spoke in a low voice and used friendly phrases. He congratulated Thoth on his order, on his service, on the calm he brought to chaos. He then asked for a favor. Not a large one, he claimed. A small correction, a line on a tablet, a sentence on a roll. The god said the record contained words spoken in a moment of heat, and that those words did not represent the god's true intent. He said the record would cause trouble in the future, and trouble helped no one, so it would be better to remove it now. He offered Thoth a gift in exchange, an offering of silver, a promise of support, a vow to praise Thoth's wisdom publicly. The god expected negotiation. The god expected Thoth to look tempted, because temptation makes the other party feel powerful. Thoth asked to see the record. The god hesitated, then produced the tablet. Thoth read the line. He read it slowly, not because he struggled, but because slowness forces the other party to hear their own words again. The line held an oath. The oath held a condition. The condition held a consequence. It was written clearly. There was no room for misunderstanding. Thoth looked up and asked whether the god had spoken these words. The god said yes, but insisted again on the heat of the moment. Thoth asked whether the god had known other gods were present. The god said yes, and began to sound annoyed. Thoth asked whether the god had understood that words spoken in court carried weight. The god said yes, and tried to laugh. Thoth asked one more question. He asked whether the god wanted the world to believe that an oath meant nothing. The god did not answer at once. Thoth placed the tablet down. He did not raise his voice. He did not insult the god. He did not threaten to expose the request. He simply stated a fact. If he removed the line, the record would become unreliable. If the record became unreliable, the court would lose its ability to hold disputes without violence. If the court lost that ability, the stronger would always win by force, and the weaker gods would suffer first. The god who requested the erasure might enjoy that for a time, but eventually someone stronger would apply the same logic to them. Thoth then added another fact, colder, more personal. If he erased one line for one god, the next request would arrive within days, and then another, and then the record would turn into a pile of self-serving revisions. Thoth did not intend to spend eternity babysitting lies. The god's friendly tone hardened. The god reminded Thoth that gods did not need scribes. The god said that Thoth's position existed only because the higher gods allowed it. The gods said that the reed in Thoth's hand could be snapped. Thoth looked at the god's hand, then at the god's mouth. He then said something that landed with more force than an insult. He said that the reed was replaceable, the marks were not. The oath existed. The witnesses existed. The consequence existed. If Thoth died, someone else would still find the tablet. Someone else would still read the line. Someone else would still know what the god had promised and what the god now tried to discard. Thoth added that killing him would not remove the record. It would only prove that the god feared it. The god did not like that. The god did not have a clean answer. The god left the hall with a stiff posture and a plan to retaliate later, because gods do not forget a refusal. Thoth watched the god go and returned to his work. He made a note about the request in a private record, not the public court record. He did not do this out of spite. He did it because a god who asks for erasure once will ask again, and the second attempt might use different methods. Thoth preferred preparation over surprise. This is how writing changed the divine world. It did not make the gods kinder. It made them accountable in ways they could not easily escape. It also made them more creative in their cruelty. A god who could not erase a line could still twist interpretation. A god could argue about meaning. A god could argue about scope. A god could argue about whether a sign meant one thing or another. Thoth countered these tricks by refining the system. He introduced determinatives to clarify meaning. He established conventions. He trained scribes to recognize common deceptions. He required multiple copies stored in separate places so a single fire or a single theft would not wipe out a record. He encouraged the habit of reading aloud in court, because spoken repetition in front of witnesses created another layer of permanence. He knew that people lie most easily in private. Public statements create visible risk. Humans watched all of this with hungry eyes, because human ambition never stays small for long. Scribes rose in status. A man who could write, could negotiate with officials, could record land holdings, could draft contracts, could become indispensable. Indispensable people collect enemies. Some scribes began to believe they were harmless because they did not carry weapons. That belief amused Thoth. Harmless people do not decide taxes. Harmless people do not list the names of criminals. Harmless people do not record who owes what to whom. Harmless people do not write curses on shards and hide them in the ground. Scribes could ruin lives with a single line and could rescue lives with a single correction. They could do it without lifting a hand in violence. That power attracted those who wanted control without risk, and it attracted those who wanted to serve something larger than themselves. Thoth made room for both types, and he watched which one lasted. The ones who treated writing as a toy rarely survived the consequences. The ones who treated it as a responsibility grew into something harder to break. Priests added Thoth's name to their daily rituals. They did not always love him, but they respected him. In the morning, before the first lists of offerings, they asked for accuracy. Before a funerary text was copied, they asked for clean symbols. Before a contract was sealed, they asked that the signs hold firm. They offered incense, bread, and sometimes a simple bowl of water, because not every request needed grandeur. Thoth accepted the attention without vanity. He did not need praise to do his work. He needed the system to keep functioning. He wanted words to keep their meaning. He wanted measures to stay consistent. He wanted the calendar to continue to hold. He wanted the court to avoid falling back into constant violence, not because he hated violence on moral grounds, but because violence was inefficient. It destroyed resources. It damaged the stability that made civilization possible. It forced everyone to react instead of plan. Thoth also understood a darker fact, that the priests preferred not to speak aloud. Writing outlived the writer. A spoken insult vanished. A written insult remained available for a later reader who might not share the original context. A joke written down could become a crime in a different generation. A private confession copied and stored could become leverage centuries later. A prayer could become evidence. A contract could become a chain. Thoth did not warn humans away from this. He did not give safety lectures. Humans do not listen to safety lectures anyway, not until after the damage. He simply built the tool and watched them learn the cost. So the divine court continued, day after day, dispute after dispute, law after law. Thoth sat with his reed and his palette, recording what the gods claimed and what they refused. He did not pretend neutrality, but he did insist on clarity. His marks made promises harder to abandon. His records made lies harder to sustain. His system gave humans a way to build cities that could survive beyond a single ruler's memory. It also gave rulers a way to control those cities with frightening efficiency. Thoth knew both outcomes and did not blink. He was the god of wisdom, not the god of comfort. He watched the world grow sharper and more organized, and he kept writing, because stopping would not make the world gentler. Stopping would only make it blind. Osiris was gone, and the world behaved as if it had misplaced its spine. His throne stood empty in broad daylight, polished and prepared and useless. The priests kept the lamps lit and the chants steady, because routine is what people reach for when they fear the roof will fall in. But the air carried a different weight now. The Nile still rose and fell, the grain still pushed up through mud, children still cried and laughed and grew, yet everyone felt the same absence in the order of things. A king who could be killed taught a lesson no one wanted. Set walked through that lesson with his head high. He did not whisper his claim. He did not apologize for it. He said the throne belonged to him because strength should rule, and because Osiris had failed to keep it. His followers repeated the claim until it sounded ordinary, which is how most ugly ideas survive. Horus did not start as a rival standing at the steps of the throne with soldiers behind him. He started as a child kept alive by secrecy and stubbornness. Isis did not grieve in a way that stayed private. She grieved with planning. She gathered pieces of what Set had tried to erase. She found allies who disliked Set's certainty. She used names as weapons. She used rituals as locks. She watched the sky, watched the shifting loyalties of the court, watched who offered condolences and who offered silence. In time, her son grew into a young god with a straight posture and a temper that did not cool quickly. He carried his father's claim in his blood and his mother's strategy in his mind. He did not smile much. He learned patience because impatience would have gotten him killed. When he finally stepped forward to declare himself, he did it without softness. He said the throne belonged to him because Osiris had been king, and because a murdered king does not lose his right by being murdered. He said Set could not claim victory and call it law. The court heard it, and the court did what courts always do when power is at stake. It delayed. The gods assembled to judge the case, and they arrived wearing their best reasons. Some came because they believed in order. Some came because they enjoyed conflict. Some came because they wanted to be seen choosing a side early so they could claim credit later. The hall filled with heat from lamps, and the sour edge of incense burned too long. Ra sat higher than the rest, bright with irritation, because this dispute interfered with his preferred schedule. Geb, the earth, held the steadier authority of someone who had seen every argument play out on his own skin. The other gods gathered and shifted and exchanged looks that carried small bargains. Hathor watched faces and measured fear. Neith, wise and distant, did not rush to speak. Even the minor gods pressed close, because a throne fight always ends by changing the balance everywhere. They called it a trial. It was also a contest. It was also an excuse. Thoth took his place with his pallet and read, calm, alert, and already tired of everyone. He recorded the claims in clean lines. Set declared himself rightful heir by strength and by seniority. Horus declared himself rightful heir by blood and by justice. Both used words that sounded noble, and both meant something simpler. Set wanted the throne and did not want to be questioned. Horus wanted the throne and did not want to be dismissed as a child. The gods argued over definitions. What counted as kingship? What counted as inheritance? What counted as lawful combat? What counted as crime when the offender was divine? Each argument produced more arguments. They asked whether Osiris had abdicated by dying, as if dying were paperwork. They asked whether Horus was too young, as if youth were a disqualifying stain. They asked whether Set's force made him necessary, as if necessity were a crown. Thoth wrote it all down, because nothing sobers a room faster than the knowledge that its stupidity will be preserved. No one wanted to admit the real issue, which was fear. Set frightened them. Horus frightened them too, but in a different way. A young god with a legitimate claim threatens the comfortable habits of those who have learned to survive by compromise. Set threatened them with violence. Horus threatened them with consequences. Both types of fear kept the court from reaching a quick verdict, so they chose the oldest trick in a stalled judgment. They demanded proof through contests. Set welcomed contests. He trusted his body. He trusted his ferocity. He trusted that the gods would mistake intimidation for legitimacy. Horus welcomed contests too, but with less joy. He had learned to fight, yes, but he had also learned that contests rarely stay fair. A contest is a controlled environment until someone powerful decides it is not. Thoth watched the shift from legal argument to spectacle and knew exactly what it meant. The trial had stopped being about right and wrong. It had become about which candidate could survive public humiliation and private injury long enough to outlast the other. The first contests were almost polite, tests of endurance, challenges of skill. They raced, they wrestled, they performed ritual tasks meant to demonstrate fitness for rule. Set took every chance to turn these trials into a display of dominance. Horus took every chance to show that he could remain standing even when provoked. The gods watched and pretended they were impartial. They were not. Every cheering voice picked a side. Every silence picked a side. Every god who called for another contest instead of a verdict picked a side. Thoth kept recording, and his record became the only stable surface in a hall full of shifting loyalties. Then the contests turned ugly, because Set did not like slow victories. He wanted a moment where Horus broke in front of everyone. He wanted the court to see Horus as weak, as unfit, as easily damaged. Horus wanted Set exposed as a murderer who treated law as a joke. Neither outcome arrived cleanly. The gods permitted escalating cruelty because it entertained them, and because it spared them from making a decision. Thoth did not entertain himself. He watched for the moment the dispute would spill beyond repair. One day, Set proposed a boat race. It sounded simple. 2 boats, a clear course, a winner. Ra approved because it sounded decisive, and because Ra liked anything that looked organized from a distance. Horus agreed because refusing would look like fear, and fear is what Set sold. Set arrived with a boat that could smash reeds and cut water with brute force. Horus arrived with a boat built to move fast and hold its line. The race began. The crowd shouted. The water churned. Set cheated early and openly, ramming, blocking, attempting to capsize. Horus held his course and moved forward anyway. When Set realized he could not win cleanly, He tried to win by destroying the race itself. The boats collided. Wood split. A divine contest became a brawl on water. The gods cheered as if they were watching a festival performance. Thoth wrote down who interfered, who laughed, who called for restraint, and who called for more. Set proposed another contest after that, and another, each one aimed less at judgment and more at injury. He challenged Horus in ways that forced Horus to answer or look unworthy. He demanded strength tests where success depended on tolerating pain. He demanded fights where the goal was not victory, but damage that stayed visible. Horus fought back because he had no choice, and because he carried anger that needed somewhere to go. He struck Set hard enough to make Set bleed, and Set took the blood as proof that Horus could be drawn into the same violence Set enjoyed. Horus watched Set smile through pain and realized Set considered pain a kind of currency. The gods did not stop the contests. They told themselves they were letting the rightful king prove himself. They told themselves they were testing Set's claim. They told themselves many things. They were also avoiding responsibility. Thoth knew it. He wrote that down too, though not in those exact words. He wrote the details that would make that avoidance obvious to anyone reading later. The number of times the council postponed a decision. The number of new contests demanded after a clear outcome. The number of times the same gods spoke about order while encouraging disorder. At one point, the dispute turned personal in a way that left the court tense and quiet. Set tried to humiliate Horus with a kind of aggression meant to destroy Horus's claim by shame rather than by force. Set understood that kingship rested not only on blood and law, but also on perception. He wanted Horus marked as unfit in the minds of the gods. Horus resisted and retaliated, and the matter did not end cleanly. It became another argument layered onto the main one. Another stain each side tried to smear across the other. The gods reacted with the fascination of people watching cruelty from a safe distance. They debated what it meant, what it proved, how it should be interpreted, and how it could be used as leverage. Thoth handled the evidence, handled the claims, handled the lies. He did not blush. He did not sermonize. He recorded. He also understood that humiliation, once introduced, never stays contained. It leaks into future violence. Isis, watching all this, made her own moves. She did not stand quietly while men and gods tore the world apart. She intervened when she saw a chance to end. Set without waiting for the court to find its spine. In one confrontation, she struck Set with direct force, and for a moment it looked as if the entire trial would end with one decisive act of vengeance. Horus reacted with fury, not because he loved Set, but because he saw his mother risking everything, and because he feared the court would use her intervention to discredit him. He shouted. He threatened. He acted like a young god trapped between personal loyalty and public necessity. The gods watched that too. Thoth watched it and recognized the pattern. The trial was teaching Horus how to be a king by teaching him how to sacrifice comfort, including the comfort of simple gratitude. As the contests continued, they began to break parts of Horus that should not have been breakable. That is what prolonged conflict does. It finds weak points through repetition. It takes what is strong and wears it down. Set, relentless, finally struck Horus in a way that changed everything. He attacked Horus's eye. The eye was not just a body part. It was a symbol of Horus's authority and Horus's perception. It represented his ability to watch, to judge, to protect. Set knew that. He tore at it with intent. The fight that followed was brutal and unrestrained, and the court did not stop it quickly because the gods wanted to see which one would fall first. When it ended, Horus staggered back with damage that showed in the way he held his head and in the way he looked at the world. His eye was injured. In some accounts, Set ripped it out entirely. In others, he damaged it beyond recognition. What mattered was the result. The injury did not heal on its own. The gods, suddenly faced with visible consequences, tried to pretend they had not encouraged this. They called for order. They called for medical skill. They called for a pause. They called for someone to fix what their indecision had allowed. They called for Thoth. Thoth approached Horus without urgency and without softness. He did not treat Horus as fragile. He treated Horus as an injured entity whose function needed restoration. He examined the damage with the same focus he used when reading a disputed line of text. He asked short questions. He demanded honesty. Horus, in pain and anger, answered as cleanly as he could. Set watched from a distance, satisfied, because he believed the injury would stand as proof that Horus could be diminished. Thoth did not argue with Set. He ignored Set. Ignoring someone who wants attention is one of the few clean punishments available in a hall full of proud beings. Thoth began the search for what had been lost. The eye, damaged or scattered, did not return as a single object that someone could simply pick up and hand back. It existed in pieces of meaning, pieces of function. This part represented sight. This part represented protection. This part represented wholeness. Thoth approached the problem the way he approached everything. He identified components. He named them. He counted them. He established what was missing and what could be recovered. Priests would later connect these parts to measures and fractions because priests always loved turning myth into instruction, but Thoth did not do it for priestly romance. He did it because counting creates control, and control creates restoration. He moved through the places where the contests had taken place. He questioned witnesses who preferred not to admit what they had seen. He tracked down gods and spirits who had pocketed fragments as trophies. He confronted those who tried to hide what they had taken by claiming it belonged to them now. He corrected them. He demanded return. Sometimes he negotiated. Sometimes he threatened. His threats did not rely on fire. They relied on record. He could name what a god had taken and when, and he could name what that god had promised in an earlier dispute, and he could place the two facts side by side until the thief realized the cost of refusal. Some returned fragments with angry faces. Some returned fragments with forced smiles. Some tried to bargain for favors. Thoth accepted only what helped the restoration. He did not pay bribes for stolen parts of a future king's integrity. When he had gathered enough, he began reconstruction. He used spells that were less about poetic language and more about function. He used names spoken with precision. He used ritual actions that aimed at binding pieces back into a coherent whole. He used his own authority as the one who had measured time and fixed calendars, because if you can alter the structure of days, you can also alter the structure of an injury. He applied his skill to Horus with the same cold care a skilled surgeon uses. The eye began to return to its proper role. Horus's sight sharpened. The pain retreated to a dull memory. The damage remained part of the story, because stories do not erase harm, but the function returned. Set watched this with new irritation. He had aimed to cripple Horus. Thoth had refused to let the crippling stand. Horus, restored enough to stand with confidence again, did not thank Thoth with tears or public declarations. He offered respect in the only way that mattered in that court. He listened when Thoth spoke. He tempered his impulses when Thoth advised restraint. He learned that winning a throne required more than winning fights. It required surviving the court, surviving the stories, surviving the long record that would outlast them all. The trial resumed. slower and nastier, because both sides had learned. Set learned that simple violence would not end the case. Horus learned that the gods would not deliver justice simply because it was deserved. The council dragged the dispute out until even immortals began to look bored, which is a particular kind of insult. Ra grew impatient and tried to force a conclusion. Then he hesitated, because Ra did not like choosing a side that might later make him look foolish. The older gods weighed tradition against fear. The younger gods weighed ambition against survival. Thoth watched the slow movement of opinion and understood that verdicts rarely arrive as sudden thunder. They arrive as exhaustion and calculation. At some point, the argument returned to the heart of the matter: Osiris. You cannot argue inheritance forever without addressing the fact that the previous king did not simply step aside. He was removed. The gods tried to treat that death as a past event that could be filed away. Horus refused. He brought Osiris's absence into the room again and again until the council had to acknowledge it. Set tried to reframe the murder as a necessary conflict, a victory, a reshaping of power. Horus called it what it was: a crime done for personal gain. The gods reacted with discomfort because admitting crime among gods threatened their belief that they stood above law. Thoth did not share that belief. He had written too many oaths to pretend they meant nothing. The council sought outside advice when it could not decide. They sent messages to a goddess known for clear judgment, asking whether kingship belonged to the son or the brother. They demanded formal statements, sealed and delivered, because formal statements allow a court to blame someone else. Thoth carried those messages and returned with responses that did not offer easy exits. The advice favored Horus. The court still hesitated, because the court feared Set's reaction. Set reacted anyway, with rage, with threats, with more challenges. He tried to force a result by making himself too dangerous to ignore. He demanded one final series of tests. He demanded public declarations. He demanded that the gods state clearly whether they considered him unfit. He wanted the court to fear him into agreement. Horus met him with controlled force. He did not retreat. He did not beg. He grew into the posture of kingship through stubborn repetition, showing the gods he would not vanish simply because they wished the problem away. Thoth worked through all of it as the only figure who remained functional while everyone else drowned in pride. He kept the record. He kept the calendar of events. He kept track of who voted and who changed their vote and who tried to pretend they had never spoken. He corrected misstatements. He clarified disputed terms. He spoke when the court veered toward total collapse. He did not do this out of kindness. He did it because without a verdict, the conflict would spill into the land forever, and without a verdict, the sun's schedule would suffer, the offerings would falter, the human world would shake. The gods could afford chaos for a while. Humans could not. Thoth knew that the stability of the human world fed the gods in the form of devotion and ritual. A long divine feud made temples uncertain and made prayers confused. Confused prayer did not flatter the gods. Even selfish gods understood that. The verdict finally arrived in fragments before it arrived in full. More gods spoke openly in Horus's favor. More gods began to treat Set's claim as a problem rather than an option. More gods remembered Osiris's kingship with nostalgia, and nostalgia influences judgment more than anyone likes to admit. Set's supporters grew quieter. Set himself did not become humble. He became dangerous in a sharper way, because losing without acceptance creates desperate acts. The court prepared for another violent outburst. Thoth forced the moment of conclusion with the only tool that worked in that room. He made the decision official by writing it as law. He gathered the final statements. He recorded the council's determination that Horus would be king. He recorded the reasons given, the lineage, the legitimacy, the restoration of order. He recorded Set's objections and the fact that those objections did not change the outcome. He inscribed the verdict in a form that could be repeated in temples and cited in disputes. He made it part of the structure of governance. A spoken verdict could be challenged. A written verdict could be copied, distributed, preserved. It could be taught. It could become reality through repetition. Set did not accept the decision with grace. Set never accepted anything with grace. He protested. He threatened. He promised revenge. He demanded compensation. The court offered him roles, territories, privileges, anything that might keep him from tearing everything apart. Thoth recorded those concessions too, because concessions become traps when forgotten. Horus took the throne not as a boy who had won a fight, but as a king who had survived a trial designed to break him. His eye, restored, became a sign used in offerings and protection, and the memory of its damage remained a warning. The gods had nearly ruined their own order because they enjoyed delay and conflict. Thoth's record ensured that no one could pretend it had been clean. The hall emptied slowly. The lamps burned lower. The offerings sat uneaten until priests carried them away, because even gods lose appetite after long arguments. Thoth stayed a moment longer, looking at the marks he had made. He did not smile. He did not sigh. He simply checked the final lines for accuracy, because accuracy was the only form of mercy he consistently offered. Then he sealed the record and stored it where theft would be difficult. A verdict is only useful if it survives. A dead person arrives without ceremony, no trumpet, no welcoming committee. Breath stops, the body cools, and whatever remains of the self steps forward into a passage that does not care about status, strength, or excuses. The first thing the dead notice is that the dark has rules. Torches burn with a steady flame that does not flicker in drafts, because there is no wind here that belongs to weather. The floor stays firm underfoot, and it does not forgive hesitation. The air carries the scent of resin and old incense, and underneath that, something sharper, the smell of fear that has been breathed out by countless mouths and never fully cleared. The dead walk because standing still changes nothing. Ahead, the passage opens into a hall so wide that the voice would echo if anyone dared to shout, and most do not. The place has pillars, carved surfaces, and ordered space, because even beyond death, the Egyptians build as if permanence is a duty. This is the Hall of Two Truths. The name does not reassure anyone. It suggests that one truth is not enough, and it warns that lies will meet more than one kind of judgment. Anubis waits near the center, jackal-headed, precise, and unsentimental. He does not smile. He does not threaten either. He performs his role with the calm of someone who has never expected fairness from anyone. He gestures for the dead to come closer, and the dead obey because refusal is pointless. Across the hall, a tribunal sits, and the dead can feel eyes on them before they can make out faces. Some accounts give the number as 42, and it is a satisfying number for bureaucracy, large enough to exhaust the guilty and specific enough to frighten the innocent. Each assessor holds a function. Each has a name that points toward a particular kind of failure. A person can tell themselves they lived a decent life, then look up at a row of judges whose job is to catch very specific forms of cruelty, and suddenly the word decent starts to look thin. Farther still, Osiris sits in judgment, green-faced, composed, wrapped in the signs of kingship and death, attended by Isis and Nephthys, steady as witnesses who will not be bribed. The dead see him and feel the old human reflex to bargain with authority. Some try immediately. It does not help. This court does not run on flattery. It runs on a measurement. The scale stands where the room's attention naturally falls. The apparatus looks simple, which is always how serious instruments present themselves. Two pans, a central beam, a point of balance that does not care about tears. On one side waits a feather, the feather of Ma'at, the principle of truth, order, and correct measure. It is not a symbol here. It is an object with weight and purpose. On the other side will go the heart, because the Egyptians do not treat the heart as a decoration. The heart is the seat of intent. The heart remembers what the mouth tries to revise. The dead approach and feel their own heart, as if it suddenly weighs more than it did a moment ago. Near the scale, Thoth sits with his palette and reed, ibis-headed, watchful, and exact. His presence does not promise comfort. His presence promises documentation. He does not argue with Anubis. He does not advise the dead. He simply prepares to record what happens. If a soul passes, the record will say so. If a soul fails, the record will say so. There will be no missing line to hide behind. There will be no smudged mark that allows interpretation. The dead see Thoth and recognize a particular kind of danger, the danger of being understood clearly. Amut waits too. The devourer does not stand at attention like a guard. Amut waits the way hunger waits, patient because time here does not belong to the living. Part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, built from creatures that do not negotiate. Amut does not need to speak. Amut is the consequence that requires no moral speech. The dead look at Amut and try to convince themselves that they will not feed that mouth. Some are right, many are not. The dead turn back to the assessors and do what the ritual demands. They speak their declarations, not a confession of what they did, but a denial. A list of crimes they insist they did not commit. The words come out in a formal rhythm. I did not steal. I did not kill unjustly. I did not cheat in the marketplace. I did not abuse power. I did not cause hunger. I did not lie in court. The list continues, and the dead person tries to hold the statement steady, because a wavering voice can sound like guilt, even when guilt is absent. Each denial is directed to an assessor whose job is to care about that particular sin. The process forces specificity. General goodness does not impress this court. Only details do. The dead, whether they were farmers or scribes or soldiers or priests, all learn the same lesson. A life contains more choices than the living admit. Some choices were made quickly. Some were made slowly and defended for years. Here, they all line up and demand accounting. Thoth listens to every word without expression, and he writes. The reed moves, the ink holds. He records the denials as they are spoken, not because the denials alone decide the outcome, but because the ritual matters. The words reveal what the speaker believes counts as wrongdoing. They also reveal what the speaker hopes the court will overlook. A clever liar may tailor the denials, emphasizing the sins they truly avoided and skating over the ones they enjoyed. Thoth notices. He has always noticed. He has watched gods attempt to change records and humans attempt to change reputations, and he has never been impressed by performance. His work is not to be impressed. His work is to keep the structure intact. When the dead finish the denials, Anubis steps forward again and takes the heart. The act is ritual, not surgery. The heart appears in the scale pan with the certainty of a rule. The dead do not get to argue about whether it is their heart. It is. They feel it. Their chest does not ache, but their sense of self tightens. In life, people pretend they can carry contradictions without cost. In death, contradictions become weight. Anubis adjusts the scale with careful hands. The feather lies in its pan, clean and undamaged. Thoth leans forward slightly, ready to write the result, and the dead person experiences a cold moment of clarity. They cannot charm their way out of this. They cannot intimidate the scale. They cannot offer the feather a bribe. The balance begins to move. Sometimes the shift is immediate. Sometimes it is slow. The dead watch the beam, and every small movement feels personal. A heart heavy with cruelty does not just weigh more. It pulls downward with certainty. A heart that lived with restraint, that acted with fairness, often enough that intent stayed clean, holds closer to Mahat's measure. The judgment is not about perfection. Perfection does not exist among the living. The judgment is about alignment. Did the person's intent, when measured without excuses, hold to truth and order often enough to matter? People who lived by exploiting others usually discover that exploitation has mass. People who lived by routine decency discover that decency shows up too, even when they never gave it a name. Thoth writes as the scale moves, recording not only the outcome but the fact of the measurement. He marks that the feather was present. He marks that the heart was placed correctly. He marks that the beam settled. This is the part that frightens many souls more than Amut. Amut ends you. Thoth preserves you, not as you wished you were, but as you were measured. The dead learn that reputation is not the same thing as record. In life, a person can be praised for generosity while hiding cruelty at home. In life, a person can be feared into being called righteous. Here, the scale does not respond to public approval. It responds to what you did when no one watched, to what you chose when you thought there would be no consequences, to what you told yourself when you decided to hurt someone and then slept anyway. The dead can feel the court's attention in a hard, steady way. This is not emotional judgment. It is administrative. It is also final. Some souls pass. The beam settles in balance or close enough that the court accepts the result. Anubis nods. Osiris remains composed, because Osiris has seen thousands of these, and he does not waste expression. Thoth writes the acceptance, and the dead person feels a strange mix of relief and humiliation. Relief, because they will not be devoured. Humiliation, because the relief does not come from being praised. It comes from meeting a minimum requirement enforced by cosmic order. The approved soul is allowed to proceed, to join the fields of the blessed, to continue in a form that does not involve hunger and fear as daily companions. Some describe it as a reward. Others describe it as a continuation of work. Either way, the soul moves on, and the hall does not celebrate. The hall processes the next case. Some souls fail. The beam tips, the heart drops, the feather rises. The difference can be small or huge, but any clear imbalance is enough. The dead person tries to speak. Many try to plead. Some curse. Some promise they will do better. Some demand a second measurement, as if this were a marketplace dispute. Anubis does not argue. Osiris does not bargain. The assessors do not need to shout. Amut steps forward and does what Amut does. The devouring is not a punishment delivered in anger. It is a function. A heart that cannot align with Maat does not move forward into a structured afterlife. It ends. The soul is not tortured forever. It is erased. That is the terror. People fear pain, but they fear disappearance more. Thoth records the failure and the devouring, and the dead person's name may still be spoken by relatives on earth for a time, but the soul itself does not continue in the form it hoped for. The record remains. The person does not. The irony of this hall is that it was designed to stabilize a society full of corruption and fear. Egypt had courts, contracts, taxes, labor demands, royal decrees, and a long history of people pretending to be better than they were. The Hall of Two Truths made a promise that human courts could not. It claimed that hidden actions would be weighed. It claimed that intent mattered. It claimed that lying successfully in life did not secure success after death. This promise did not end wrongdoing. Nothing ends wrongdoing. But it raised the cost. It also gave ordinary people a framework for judging their own lives. When a farmer decided whether to cheat a neighbor, the farmer could picture a scale. When a scribe decided whether to alter a record for a bribe, the scribe could picture Thoth writing down the act. When a noble decided whether to demand more grain from a starving village, the noble could picture Amut. Some ignored these pictures and did what they wanted. Many paused, and pausing sometimes changes the outcome. Thoth did not need to preach this. The system spoke for him. Thoth's role in this hall never softened. He did not become kinder because the dead arrived frightened. He did not become crueler because the guilty arrived defiant. He held a consistent posture. He sat, watched, and wrote. He worked beside Maat's feather, beside Anubis's hands, beside Osiris's judgment, and he made the outcome legible. Legibility is a form of power. It allows order to persist. It also allows shame to persist. A person who passes does not receive a flattering story as a prize. They receive a clear record that they were measured and found acceptable. A person who fails does not get to claim misunderstanding. They receive a clear record that they were measured and found wanting. For a god, this is not emotional. For a human soul, it is everything. There is a detail that matters, and it is not the scale itself. It is the act of being listened to. The negative declarations force the dead to speak about their own behavior in direct language. I did not do this. I did not do that. The process strips away the stories people tell themselves to make wrongdoing sound necessary or harmless. The dead can no longer hide behind phrases such as "everyone does it" or "I had no choice" or "it was not my fault." The assessors do not accept vague defenses. They require specific denials. If a person cannot say the denial without choking on it, the court hears that too. Thoth hears it most of all. He listens with the calm attention he used in divine disputes, and the soul realizes something unpleasant. Someone knows. Not in the broad way people say the gods know everything, but in a narrow, accurate way. Someone knows what you meant when you did it. Someone knows what you tried to pretend you meant. That knowledge is not shouted, it is written down. The living often picture judgment as drama. They imagine shouting, pleading, grand speeches, thunder, mercy granted at the last second. The Egyptian judgment is more bureaucratic than that, and this is why it scares. It treats moral failure as a measurable imbalance, not as entertainment. It treats justice as a procedure that cannot be charmed. It treats the human soul as an entry in a ledger, which is insulting if you believe you are unique and comforting if you fear randomness. Thoth sits at the center of that insult and that comfort. His record makes the procedure durable. If you wanted your wrongs to be forgotten, this is the worst possible arrangement. If you wanted your quiet decency to be counted, even when no one praised you, this is the best. When the dead leave the hall, one way or the other, Thoth does not follow. He stays. Another soul arrives. The torches keep burning. Anubis keeps moving with practiced precision. The assessors keep their gaze steady. Osiris keeps his composure. Amut keeps waiting. The structure continues, and Thoth's reed continues its small, steady work. He has written kingship verdicts and calendar reforms and oaths spoken by gods who thought themselves above consequence, and he writes the fate of ordinary souls with the same discipline. That is his authority. Not kindness, not cruelty, accuracy. A rumor entered Memphis and did not leave. It moved through colonnades and courtyards, through market stalls and temple kitchens, through the places where priests kept their mouths closed and the places where servants did not bother trying. It said there was a book, not a hymn book, not a funerary text copied 100 times until the words became ordinary. This was a single work that could not be made harmless by repetition. The rumor said Thoth wrote it himself with his own hand, not as a gift, not as a lesson, but as a contained thing, kept away from those who would use it badly, and kept away from those who would use it well and still pay the cost. The rumor also said a man could read it and command animals, water, and sky, and could see the gods without being blinded. The rumor did not say what the book would do in return. Rumors rarely include the price. They focus on the prize because that is how they recruit the foolish and the hungry. The man who listened hardest was Setna Kaimwaset, a prince by birth and a scholar by habit, the kind of person who could not walk past an inscription without wanting to know whether the scribe had made an error. He lived surrounded by comfort and still felt restless, because comfort does not satisfy the mind that wants doors opened. Setna knew the temple libraries and the training of the scribes. He could read what most men could not, and could pronounce names that most mouths mangled. Priests respected him and worried about him, because knowledge in a royal body creates problems. Setna took the rumor seriously the way he took everything seriously, with a focused attention that made people step aside. He questioned scribes who pretended ignorance. He questioned grave workers who claimed they remembered nothing. He questioned priests who tried to redirect him towards safer studies. He offered gifts. He offered threats. He offered the quiet pressure of royal authority that did not need shouting. The rumor sharpened into details. The book lay in the necropolis. It rested with a long-dead prince named Naneferkaptah, a man who had stolen the book first and had been punished in a way that made even seasoned mourners lower their eyes. The book had been buried with him because it could not be destroyed, and because no one wanted to touch it again. Setna went to the necropolis at night, because he did not want a procession, and he did not want witnesses who might later claim they warned him. He took a small group, men who could keep silent and who knew better than to ask moral questions to a prince who had already decided. The desert air sat heavy on the skin. Torches burned. Sand shifted underfoot. The tomb entrances looked like mouths forced shut. Setna moved between them with steady steps, reading names, checking markings, confirming the map in his head against the stone in front of him. When he found the tomb, he did not hesitate. The seals had been broken before. Grave robbers had tested every resting place in Egypt. This tomb, however, still carried a different kind of warning. Old spells clung to the doorway. The air tasted wrong. Setna ordered the entrance cleared anyway. Men pulled stone aside. Dust rose. The passage opened. The darkness inside waited with the patience of something that had outlasted stronger men than these. Setna entered first because he believed leadership meant never letting fear be seen behind him. His men followed, slower, less certain. Their sandals scuffed the floor, and the sound seemed louder than it should have been. The tomb held a chamber with a shrine and a sarcophagus, and it held something else too. A presence, not a living guard, not a simple spirit, a deliberate arrangement of protection that had been built to keep the book where it was. Setna saw the first sign when torchlight struck movement. Serpents, not one or two, more, coiled near chests and boxes set deep in the chamber. Their bodies looked too smooth, their eyes too alert. A snake lifted its head and watched Setna without the dullness of an animal. Another slid across the floor, with a speed that made one of Setna's men flinch and nearly drop his torch. Setna did not step back. He spoke words learned from temple instruction, words that bound and limited, words that told a creature it could not cross a certain line. The snakes paused. Setna continued. He spoke again. The snakes lowered their heads. He did not smile. He did not boast. He worked. His men watched with relief and fear mixed together, because they could see the prince had more than curiosity. He had preparation. That preparation did not guarantee safety. It simply meant he would reach danger faster. Setna ordered the chests opened. The first chest was sealed and heavy. It resisted, then yielded. Inside was another. That one held another. Wood, copper, stone, each layer designed to slow a thief, each layer designed to make the thief feel they were earning the prize through effort. Setna's men sweated and grunted. Their hands shook. They did not like the sound of metal scraping on stone in a tomb full of snakes and silence. Setna kept giving calm instructions. He treated the whole thing as an inventory problem. Open this. Move that. Do not damage the seal. Do not spill the contents. When the last chest opened, the book lay inside, wrapped, protected, and still somehow exposed, because a written work that powerful does not sit quietly. It made the air feel charged. It made the torch flames burn steadier and hotter. Setna reached for it with both hands. The moment he touched it, the snakes reacted. One surged forward. Setna snapped a word of command. The snake stopped a handspan from his foot, trembling with force it could not release. He lifted the book and held it close. A voice spoke from the sarcophagus. It was not a groan. It was not a vague whisper. It was clear enough to carry anger without needing volume. The dead prince Naneferkapta addressed Setna by name and told him to put the book down and leave. Setna turned toward the sarcophagus and answered politely, because even a stubborn thief can have manners. He said he had come for the book. He said he would take it. He offered to copy it and return it, as if copying could make the original less dangerous, and as if returning it would undo what he planned to do with what he read. Naneferkapta laughed once, a short sound with no warmth. He told Setna the story Setna should have asked for before entering. Naneferkapta said he had once been like Setna. He had wanted what the book promised. He had found it. He had taken it. He had read it. And the cost had arrived with perfect order. Naneferkapta described the theft without pleading for sympathy. He spoke as someone reporting facts that no longer needed emotion. He said he had gone with his wife Awer and their child, not because he lacked courage, but because he believed he could share triumph with family. He said they had reached the place where the book was kept, guarded by serpents and by the kind of protection that does not care how noble a thief thinks he is. He said they overcame the guards. He said they took the book. He said he read the first spell and learned to understand the speech of animals. And the animals spoke without reverence because animals do not respect titles. He said he read the second spell and could see the gods moving and speaking. And he saw what most humans do not, that divine attention is not always kind. He said he felt stronger, smarter, more capable than any man had a right to feel. Then he said the punishment arrived. His child died first, taken by water. Awer tried to save the child and died too. Naneferkapta retrieved their bodies because he refused to accept loss. He carried them back, believing he could use the book to reverse the outcome. The book did not offer that. It offered knowledge, not mercy. Naneferkapta returned to Egypt carrying the dead, and then he died as well, because the theft had not been forgiven, and because the world had not agreed to his terms. He ended, sealed in the tomb with the book buried with him, as if burial could stop the appetite of the living. Setna listened to all of this and felt only a brief chill. He did not show it. He said Naneferkapta's story was unfortunate. He then said it would not happen to him. He believed the difference between a doomed man and a successful man was personal skill. This belief ruins people daily. It ruins kings. It ruins priests. It ruins scholars. It ruins anyone who thinks fate is what happens to others. Nanafakapta gave him one final warning. He said the book always collects payment. If Setna stole it, Setna would return it, one way or another. Setna responded with a calm refusal. He ordered his men to finish the work and leave. They left with the book. The snakes, constrained by Setna's words, did not strike. The tomb closed behind them, but the warning did not remain inside. Setna brought the book to his house, shut the doors, and dismissed everyone. He did not want witnesses. He did not want interruptions. He wanted the experience to belong to him alone. He unwrapped the book with careful hands, because a person can be reckless with consequences and still respect craft. The writing on the pages looked clean and precise. It did not look ancient in the way humans expect ancient things to look. It looked intentional, as if time had not been allowed to touch it. Setna began to read. He spoke the words aloud, because written spells do not always activate in silence. He pronounced each sign with exactness. He refused to stumble. He felt the first effect quickly. Animals nearby reacted. A dog lifted its head and listened. Birds outside shifted on their perches. Setna kept reading. He reached the first spell that allowed understanding of animal speech, and he tested it at once. He called for a servant to bring a cat. The servant hesitated, then obeyed. The cat arrived, annoyed, and Setna spoke to it. The cat answered, not with reverence, but with an impatient truth about hunger and comfort and preference. Setna laughed, delighted and offended at the same time. He asked more questions. The cat answered with simple honesty and then tried to leave. Setna stopped it because he had gained a new power and wanted immediate proof of control. The cat resisted with its claws. Setna let it go, irritated. He then realized something. He could understand animals. He could not make them respect him. This bothered him more than it should have. He read further. The next spells promised command of water and sky. Setna tested them too. He poured water into a bowl and spoke a phrase. The water moved, not by chance, but by direct response. It rose and fell at his instruction. He looked at it and felt satisfaction tighten his chest. He stepped outside and spoke another phrase. Wind shifted. Dust moved. The air cooled. He felt the new ability settle in his body, and with it came a quiet arrogance. He could do what others could not. He could enforce his will on elements that usually ignored human wants. He returned inside and read more. Then the book began to answer back in a way Setna did not expect. The knowledge did not sit politely in his mind. It pushed. It demanded application. It made ordinary duties feel small. Temple rituals felt slow and repetitive. Court life felt shallow. Conversation with other scholars felt dull because they did not know what he now knew. Setna began to withdraw. He still attended gatherings, still spoke when required, still wore his status correctly, but his attention stayed elsewhere. He could not stop thinking about the next spell. He could not stop imagining what else the book might unlock. He began to treat people as obstacles between him and reading time, and he began to treat his own body as a tool to keep awake. Sleep became a nuisance. Food became an interruption. He grew thinner, his eyes sharpened, his temper shortened. Those close to him noticed, and they kept quiet, because speaking against a prince rarely ends well. The punishment did not arrive in one clean blow. It arrived through distortion. Setna went to the river one day and watched a group of children playing near the water. One of them fell. The others shouted. Setna moved at once, because he had power and believed power should solve problems. He spoke. Words meant to still the water. The water stilled. The child did not rise. Setna stepped closer, irritated, and then saw that the child was not a stranger. It was his own son. The scene made no sense, because his son had been safe at home. Setna reached into the river and pulled the body out. He felt the weight, the limpness, the slick water on skin. His mind tried to reject it as impossible. His hands did not care about impossible. They held what they held. People screamed. Setna shouted for help. He carried the body toward home, and as he moved, the street around him shifted. The houses looked wrong. The faces looked unfamiliar. His own servants did not recognize him. He reached his doorway and found strangers there. He demanded entrance. They refused. He pushed past them and went inside, and inside he found his house arranged differently. He found his wife in grief, and she stared at him with hatred, as if he had caused the death directly. Setna tried to speak and could not find the right words. He reached for a spell, because spells had become his first response. He spoke. Nothing changed. The book's power did not undo what the book's curse had arranged. Then the scene broke, and Setna found himself back by the river with his son alive and laughing nearby, splashing in shallow water and looking at Setna as if his father had lost his mind. Setna stood there, shaking with anger and fear. He had been shown a death that had not happened, yet the panic in his body was real. The humiliation was real. He returned home and tried to pretend nothing was wrong. He could not. The experience had marked him. It had taught him that the book could use his own mind against him. It could create visions that forced him to feel consequences before they occurred. It could remove the comfort of certainty. It could make him doubt what he saw. A man who cannot trust his senses is easy to control, and Setna understood that with growing dread. The visions continued. They targeted what Setna cared about, and they did it without subtlety. He saw his wife taken from him in scenes that changed each time, sometimes by illness, sometimes by accusation, sometimes by a sudden act of violence that he could not prevent even when he had spells on his tongue. He saw his children lost. He saw himself disgraced in court, laughed at by the very scholars who had once feared his intelligence. He saw himself alone with the book in an empty house, still reading, still hungry for more, still unable to stop. He woke from these experiences sweating, furious, convinced he could outsmart them if he stayed calm. He read more because he believed more knowledge would protect him. That was the trap. The more he read, the deeper the book's influence sank into his life. At last, the dead Prince Naneferkaptah appeared to him again, not in the tomb, but in a moment when Setna had hoped he was alone. Setna had fallen asleep over the text and woke to find the room colder and the lamplight steadier. Naneferkaptah stood there with the calm of a man who no longer expected to be believed. He told Setna the visions would not stop. He told Setna the book had been stolen, and stolen things demand return. Setna tried to threaten him. The threat sounded foolish even as it left his mouth. Naneferkaptah did not react. He said Setna could keep the book for a time. He could enjoy its spells and its power. The payment would not be optional. It would arrive through what Setna valued most, because the book punished through attachment. Naneferkaptah then gave Setna one piece of advice, the only helpful thing he had offered since the beginning. He told Setna to return the book, while Setna still had enough of himself left to do it willingly. Setna did not return it immediately. He argued with himself. He negotiated with his own fear. He tried to find a way to keep the knowledge and avoid the cost. That is a common human hobby. It fails. His life began to fray in ordinary ways too. He snapped at servants. He ignored duties. He frightened his wife with his distracted intensity. He looked at his children and felt not comfort but a sharp worry that the book would use them again. The worry made him distant. The distance made them fearful. The fear made his house colder than any curse needed to make it. Setna realized he was already paying. Not in a dramatic single scene, but in the slow erosion of relationships. Knowledge had made him less present, less patient, less capable of ordinary affection. He began to understand what Nanefakapta meant. The payment was not always death. Sometimes it was the loss of normal life. When Setna finally went back to the tomb, he went at dawn, not because he wanted light, but because he no longer cared about secrecy. He carried the book wrapped in cloth and held it as if it might bite. He brought offerings, not because he believed offerings would erase theft, but because he knew ritual matters in Egypt, and he wanted every possible guard against more chaos. He entered the necropolis with fewer men this time. His voice sounded different. It carried less confidence. He reached the tomb, opened it, and descended. The snakes were still there. They watched him. They did not need to strike. Setna approached the sarcophagus and called out to Nanefakapta. He spoke with a controlled tone and admitted he had come to return what he took. Nanefakapta answered from within the stone, and the answer carried no triumph. It carried only expectation. Setna placed the book back into the chest. He sealed the chest. He restored each layer, box within box, as it had been. He did this carefully because he wanted the book contained, and because he had learned that careless handling invites further harm. The moment the book settled into its place, Setna felt a shift. The pressure in his mind loosened. The obsessive hunger eased. The silence in the tomb did not become friendly, but it became less hostile. Nanefakapta spoke again and demanded more than the book's return. He demanded the return of his wife and child, not in flesh, but in proper burial, in proper placement beside him, so the family would rest together rather than remain scattered by the consequences of the first theft. Setna agreed. He carried out the task. He retrieved the bodies where they had been kept. He returned them. He arranged them. He sealed the tomb again. Each action felt like repairing damage that should never have happened. He did not feel redeemed. He felt exhausted. The book had taught him a clearer truth than any lecture could. Knowledge that large does not behave like a trophy. It behaves like a responsibility that punishes the irresponsible. Thoth did not appear in the tomb with a dramatic entrance. He did not need to. Thoth rarely announces himself when the outcome is already determined. Still, Setna felt the god's presence in a way he could not mistake. It arrived as the sensation of being observed without threat, the sensation of being evaluated with accuracy. Setna looked toward the darkness between the chests and the walls, and for a moment he imagined the ibis-headed god seated there with a reed and palette, recording Setna's choices without comment. Setna understood then that Thoth had not written the book to tempt mortals. Thoth wrote it because writing exists, and the most powerful writing will always attract theft. Thoth contained it, and he let the book enforce its own boundaries. He did not forbid knowledge. He charged for it. The charge was not a coin. The charge was consequence. Setna left the tomb and returned to his life. He kept his status. He kept his wealth. He kept his family. Yet he did not return unchanged. He carried memory of the visions in his body, and memory changes behavior when a person is honest about it. He became more cautious in his ambition, not less ambitious. Caution and ambition often live in the same mind. He treated the temple texts with more respect, not because he feared priests, but because he understood that some words do not forgive carelessness. He watched younger scholars with a sharper eye, the ones who wanted shortcuts and secret power. He did not tell them the whole story. People rarely learn through stories they did not live, but he did place obstacles in their path. He encouraged slower study. He insisted on discipline. He made the easy theft of knowledge more difficult. because he now understood that difficulty can be a form of protection. The Book of Thoth remained where it belonged, buried and guarded, not because humans stopped wanting it, but because the story of Setna traveled and did some of the guarding on its own. A whispered tale can deter as effectively as a locked door, at least for those who listen. The ones who do not listen always exist. They always will. Thoth knows that too. He built a world where writing holds power, and he also built a world where power attracts misuse. He does not panic about it. He records it. He allows payment to arrive when payment is due. He makes sure the lesson stays available for the next person who thinks they can take a god's knowledge and keep it without consequence. The temples kept changing their paint, but the habit stayed. A priest dipped a reed into ink and wrote Thoth's name at the top of a list, because lists ran the country as surely as kings did. In the markets, weights clinked on scales, and merchants argued over measures, and somewhere in the background stood the quiet idea that correct counting mattered. Scribes trained boys to hold their wrists steady and to copy without vanity, and they prayed to Thoth with the practical desperation of people who knew a single smudge could ruin a contract or condemn a man. Thoth did not need statues to remain present. He lived in every line that refused to fade. Foreign tongues arrived, and they did not ask permission. Greeks walked into Egypt with confidence and curiosity, naming things as if naming were ownership. They found Thoth and recognized a familiar job: messenger, interpreter, keeper of records. They called him Hermes, and then improved the mistake by making it useful. Temples became libraries of mixed language. Priests who once wrote only in sacred signs now learned new letters, faster to scratch, easier to spread. Thoth did not protest the new symbols. He had never cared about the shape of a mark as much as its accuracy. He cared that meaning survived travel. Some men wanted more than accuracy. They wanted secret authority. They gathered in rooms with smoke and careful voices and spoke about Thoth as if he were a private mentor rather than a god with his own interests. They called him thrice great, as if adding titles could make their rituals work better. They wrote treatises about stars, metals, and the structure of the body. And they claimed the knowledge came from him. Sometimes it did. More often it came from their own hunger dressed in borrowed holiness. Thoth watched them anyway. He watched the ones who sought understanding and the ones who sought dominance. And he recorded their outcomes in the only way he ever recorded anything, by letting consequences attach to actions. Years became centuries. Centuries became a long procession of rulers who wanted their names carved deeper than the previous rulers. Libraries grew. Libraries burned. New texts replaced old ones, and old ones survived in copies hidden in jars and walls. Thoth remained the patron of every person who tried to preserve a thought against decay. Astronomers charted the sky and pretended their patience was purely scientific. Alchemists heated metal and pretended their greed was spiritual. Bureaucrats stamped papyrus and pretended they served justice rather than power. Thoth did not correct their stories. He simply stayed present, because writing makes presence durable. Somewhere, a young scribe looked at an empty page and hesitated, then began, and the first clean line of ink made the world slightly more ordered and slightly more dangerous. That was always the bargain. Thoth accepted it. He always had.